I'd like to welcome everyone to the Provo Municipal Council meeting for Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. It is roughly 5:35 p.m. and we are gathered in the City Center Municipal Council chambers located at 351 West Center Street, Provo, Utah. This meeting is being broadcast live on the web on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it will also be available for on-demand viewing. The council requests that attendees help maintain the decorum of the meeting by silencing electronic devices, being respectful to others, and refraining from applause or other outbursts during the proceedings of the meetings. We will begin with a roll call, and just for fun, we'll start on the other end. Mr. Parker.
Wayne Parker.
Mayor Kafusi.
George Handley.
Dave Connect.
Kay Van Buren.
David Harding.
Dave Sewell.
George Stewart.
Gary Winterton.
Brian Jones.
Cliff Strachan.
We will begin with an opening prayer that will be given by Mr. John Borgett. Afterwards, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Dustin Graybaugh.
Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful for the opportunity which we have to meet here tonight to discuss important city business and to hold this council meeting. We're thankful for our council members and for the service that they provide for the residents of Provo. We ask that we'll be able to conduct the important business tonight and that we'll be able to come up with outcomes that will be beneficial to the city and the residents and the community. We're so thankful for all of our many blessings, and we ask special blessing throughout this country that that individuals can follow the laws and the principles and keep their values high. And we're so thankful for all that will do for us. And we take in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
The audience, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Borgett. Mr. Graybaugh. Up first, we will consider the approval of the February 19, 2019 council meeting minutes. Are there any requests for changes to these minutes? Seeing none, unless there's any objections, we will declare the minutes approved by unanimous consent. We will now enjoy a presentation on funding for the Provo City Airport expansion presented by our Deputy City Mayor, Mr. Isaac Paxman.
Thank you. Just a few items to report. We did have the governor sign the bill on April 1st, so we got the last piece of that funding secured. Not long after that, the mayor was able to meet with members of the Department of Transportation, and Wayne was there as well, and they reported that for the state portion, which is $9 million, they will be writing Provo City a check in July and giving us the $9 million, which is very helpful because the county portion looks like it's kind of tied to being given to us upon completion, and we didn't have a lot of cash for this, so it's really helpful to have that $9 million in hand. So those are kind of the main items to report on, but I've got just a little bit of a presentation that we can go through here. For those who are new to the discussion, Provo has an airport, and we have a terminal, but it only has enough to house about the capacity of one airplane full, and so we're very limited on airlines that can come and service us and the number of flights we can have each day, particularly because there are kind of rush hour periods for flights and we can't stack more when we only have the one gate. So we've been reaching out to the state and to the county to get additional funding, and we just wanted to give you a little bit of update on that and some of the timing pieces. For those who, again, haven't seen, this is the design plan. This will be south of where the current terminal facility is. And we'll do it this is only to build phase one. We've obtained the $4.3 million from the county, the $9 million from the state, and that's going to help us along with a significant contribution from Provo City and some federal money we'll talk about in a minute to help us build that purple phase one box that will have 4 gates and we'll have the capacity to add phase 2 when needed, to add an additional 6 gates. And we're even in our design phase, we're going to ask the designer to help us price what it would be to add additional phases, so that if we get into discussions before construction is completed and we have an airline saying, hey, if you build 3 more, we'd be happy about that and we can help contribute towards it, we'll know the price for them. Okay, we already have our engineer, Javiation, and our architect selected, MHTN Architects. And by the way, I have the whole team here. We've got Dave Decker, we've got Brian Torgeson and Steve Gleason, the airport manager, all who've been a great team working on this. This has been a fun project, and we couldn't ask for better people to work with on this. We've got the right people to make this happen, and full support from them. They've made all this happen. They're just letting me present tonight. But beginning the early phase of design work, the plan is to have some outreach opportunities where people can come and give a voice on what they want to see at this terminal. Steve is going to be going on a pretty exhaustive tour to see just some local nearby terminals and make sure we've seen all of those. We've had a tip to go see a couple others, and so we'll be planning to make sure we've seen what best practices are. But there will be a chance for community members to come meet with the design team and give their voice to what features they think this terminal ought to have, and those will be taken into consideration. Just to review the funding, we do have the Federal Aviation Administration money. 2.1 million of it, as you see on the lower left, is currently available, and we expect another 7 million to be available as soon as October 2019. So again, this is an amazing project where we get to talk about federal, city, state, county, all chipping in their piece, and it's a great synergy and just a great project that had such great support. Let's see here. So we've got the site environmental clearance in process. So we're working on the environmental. We've got the design of the apron. The federal money is really for the apron. It's for the concrete slab that's going to be in front of the terminal. And that's in process, the design. The construction of the apron is expected to begin in fall of 2019. So we do anticipate a nice grand, what do we call it, groundbreaking ceremony that Mr. Gleason will be working on to put together something that'll be a good event for people to come to and celebrate the real beginning of the project. And then here's just some details on the federal money. Again, it was signed by Governor Herber on April 1st. It was Senate Bill 268, and that's, again, all there, and the money should be available late June, early July. Just to review the Utah County money, which we're very grateful for. That's available. We haven't seen the interlocal agreement yet, but they're in process of working that together, and this does come from the tourism, recreation, cultural, and convention tax, and we just got great support from the board that was very enthusiastic about this. This is a huge give for them. They're giving a lot smaller amounts usually, and they held a special session for us, and they expressed their enthusiasm, and they gave us exactly the dollar amount we were looking for, and the county commissioners did the same. So we're so grateful to the partners on this. This was very significant. And then here's a timeline that's going to be hard to read, and if you have detailed questions, we do have our team here who can get in the details for you. But the main points, the main takeaways are, again, groundbreaking. This fall, we'll need to do some work with the ground out there because of the water table, where they'll have to have just a settling process where we add dirt and just let it settle for maybe 6 months. So the actual construction on the terminal, we think, will begin spring 2020. It is conceivable that we would be cutting a ribbon next year, but more likely the expectation, we think we're going to be in spring of 2021 is probably a good target to be thinking of when we'll be cutting a ribbon. So if there are any questions, we have the team here to answer. But we wanted to give you that update. Or anything to add from the team, that critical piece? Okay, Gary, Mr. Winterton.
And I have had the opportunity. I am so grateful. This is awesome for Provo City. This is really a huge deal. I remember Mayor Curtis saying the next big deal. Well, this is definitely a big deal, and I'm grateful for that.
This might be worthy of the word epic. We haven't
Yes, and I'm with you. I agree with that. One thing that I look at I'm great. Steve had a lot of this grant already lined up as far as the federal funding go, and that was based a lot on matching grants. And I think some of these things that we're getting from the state and the county, we don't have any real strings tied attached, but they do have some expectations, from what I understand, for what we will be putting into the project.
Yes, this didn't get into the Provo City side of the funding, and when you really tally up all the dollars and you give us the value of the land that we're contributing and everything else, the infrastructure improvements, it's significant. It's about 19 million. But again, some of that is value of land that's been there for a long time. We purchased it a long time ago. So, and so as far as the Provo City money, the important thing we want people to know is that no increase to taxes is required for that money. There's most of it, again, is infrastructure that was going to happen at some point. And maybe some of these projects were set for 5 years down the road, and we had something else set for next year. And we are, because of this amazing opportunity, having to say, okay, let's do the wastewater out of the airport first and put that one next. So there is a little bit of that adjustment going on, but there's no real need for the city council to find new money for us and that kind of thing. And he'll correct that.
No, just wanted to add, we intend on coming before you in 2 weeks in a work session to outline the Provo City side of this. We're meeting in the next few weeks with all the departments that have been implicated in this process, and we'll come before the council in about 2 weeks and detail exactly the Provo City funding side of this. So hopefully that helps.
It does. And I'm just grateful for the foresight that other people have had to be able to have the ability to get those matching funds through grants, so we can get the grants through land and other things. Yep. It's something that we as a council and as a present council need to continue to look at to protect the future. We couldn't have done it if we wouldn't have had some of this land that has been purchased years and years ago. So.
And having that federal grant that Mr. Gleason had gone and obtained was really a great thing for us to have as a dialogue, that we've got this federal money, we've got a timetable, so please come help us make this happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Since you brought it up, Mr. Winterton, the matching grant money, as the council is aware, we use existing property that we have either purchased in the past or purchased for a project. This project will deplete that property list. So that's a side that you'll hear next week as well. But I just want the council to be aware we are to the point where we need to be looking again for properties to purchase. If that's the model that the council wants to continue to follow, which has been very good for us in the past. So.
But just to clarify, there's no new matching as a result of the county or the state money. So everything we're doing was a part of that federal grant that had already been there, really. So anyway, unless there are other questions, thank you.
All right. We can bring up the list of items. All right. So Mr. Jones, would you explain to us the public comment portion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I would initially comment, my understanding is that item number 1 has been continued because Mr. Walter is not available. Is that right? Sure. So as indicated with that exception, as indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, which is all of the items tonight, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Additional time may be given to individuals specifically invited to speak, such as applicants, neighborhood chairs, or others that may be representing additional persons. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. Due to noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Those with comments for the open public comment period are invited to approach the podium at this time.
Seeing no one approach the podium, we will now close the public comment portion and we'll move to our first item, which is actually being held by the redevelopment.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Because the item 1 is continued, you don't need to go into redevelopment agency at all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We will move now to item number 2, which is an implied motion on an ordinance granting new Cingular Wireless PCS LLC a non-exclusive franchise to operate a telecommunications network in Provo City, Utah. And this will be presented by our Assistant City Attorney, Mr. Marcus Draper.
Thank you, Chair. So this is New Cingular Wireless PCS LLC is a subsidiary of AT&T. So this is on behalf of AT&T, who is looking to place small cell wireless facilities in Provo, and negotiated a franchise agreement with the city in order to do that. Small cell wireless technology would allow them to ultimately bring 5G technology to Provo and have the next generation of cell technology come to Provo City, at least from AT&T. So from our standard template, there are, I think, 2 notable changes outlined in the memorandum I submitted when placing this on the agenda. Specifically, that we typically in our agreements have audit rights to make sure that we are getting what we are promised, the 3.5% of their gross sales in Provo. However, the state also has those audit rights, and per state law, we are required to have an interlocal agreement with Utah State Tax Commission to have them directly collect the municipal telecommunications license tax on our behalf and then turn over their portion, or our portion, to us. And so in this, the 2 changes relate to that, and one, that the state would be the only body that could conduct an audit, and we would give up those audit rights. This doesn't appear to be a real problem because, one, it's not something that we have typically done, even though we have that right with these contracts, and 2, the state has that right, and so the state, certainly if it perceives that the tax is not being paid, can conduct that audit for not just Provo, but for all the cities in the state of Utah. The other has to do with the method in which we collect the 3.5% of the gross sales. Now, there's a state tax, as I just mentioned, the municipal telecommunications license tax that states that those sales, they're being taxed at 3.5% across the state, including in Provo, and that the tax that are collected for Provo sales are given to us. And so rather than have it being called a franchise fee that is then offset against the tax, it is simply cutting out that extra language and saying that the state will collect the tax on our behalf and we'll get that 3.5%. But other than that, there are other minor changes, but nothing that I think is all that meaningful. So are there any questions on this?
Yes. Got a quick one. So those changes seem quite reasonable to me, to the point that I wonder if we should update our template to include this kind of going forward.
I mean, we could do that. I haven't seen any reason to do that because this is the first time anyone's asked us to make that particular change. We could, if companies continually ask us to make that change. I think that's something we can consider. At this point, I don't know if it's necessary because, again, I don't think that it affects the revenue that we collect, so I don't know that it makes a difference one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like it's revenue neutral, but just simpler. So.
I would agree that it is simpler. Given that the template is as it is, I don't know that it makes sense to make that change unless we continually get this request to change it.
Okay. Any other
It's
comments?
certainly something we could look to in the future.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. Draper. We will now open this item for public comment. If anyone in attendance would like to speak to it, please come forward at this time. Seeing none, we will close the public comment and we'll bring it back to the council for discussion. Any points of discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote on the implied motion. Those in favor? That is unanimous. Item number 3 is an implied motion on a resolution approving the execution of a master tax-exempt lease purchase agreement for the purchase of fire apparatus. This will be presented by Mr. Dan Follett, our Finance Director.
Thank you, Chair Harding and Municipal Council. The Fire Department has identified a need to replace 2 particular apparatuses or trucks. One is a Rosenbauer ladder truck, and the other would be replaced with a Rosenbauer heavy rescue truck and the related equipment for those trucks. This is part of a planned ongoing replacement schedule of fire vehicles. Jeremy Hedman's also here tonight if you have more questions on the particulars of those vehicles. But historically what we've done and what we're asking the council to consider approving is that we finance the replacement of these significant vehicles with lease financing. And so we did an RFP for lease financing, and we got 12 responses, and they were very competitive. The highest rate that we received in terms of a response to the RFP was at 3.25%. The lowest rate and most competitive overall contract was at 2.63%, and that was from Zions Bank. And so we are asking the council and recommending to the council to consider the approval of that lease and allow the administration to move forward with the execution of that lease. The lease amount would be for $2,490,000. All of the proceeds would be used for the purchase of those 2 large trucks and the related equipment associated with those trucks. The repayment would be over an 8-year term. That is a tax-exempt rate, and we believe is very competitive by the basis of the bid responses we received. Again, the best rate was 2.63. The next lowest rate was 2.68, and then 2.82. So you can see they were very close, but again, Zions Bank was the most competitive. Zions Bank also has no penalty for early repayment if we chose to do that. And so we're recommending that the council approve this lease purchase agreement. And I would open it up to any questions from the council at this point in time.
Any questions?
Why do we use the term lease if we're purchase?
It's essentially a lease with an option to purchase the equipment on the back end for essentially $1, and it's just the structure of the financing. They're considered technically leases up until the point in time that we purchase them, but we have the right, and in fact, everyone anticipates that we will own the equipment at the end of the lease, even though there are leases where you return the equipment at the end of the lease. This is not how this lease is structured, so.
Other questions?
Tax exempt. The other thing I would mention is it's not bank qualified. That kind of gets into the details of how a bank that actually issues this type of lease and holds the lease has to treat it for tax purposes. Generally, if the banks essentially, they deduct the interest expense that they generally pay on deposits, and they utilize, to the extent they utilize that funding to fund this lease, and it's a tax-exempt lease, the IRS requires that you limit the amount of deduction that you get for the interest expense related to the funding of that lease. If it's bank qualified, they're not required to adjust the interest expense that they deduct on their tax return. But in order to be bank qualified, an entity can't be issuing more than, it's either $9 or $10 million of tax-exempt debt during the calendar year. And as all of you are aware, we issued approximately $69 million in tax-exempt debt earlier this year for the construction of the city facilities. So it's not bank qualified from that perspective. That said, because of Provo's credit rating and strong credit quality, that has probably little to no impact on the rate that we're paying, so. It is, though, I agree with you. It's interesting that it's called a lease, and most people associate leases with something you use for a period of time and then return the asset. But that's not the structure of these leases. We will own the equipment at the end of the lease.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, it might be for the deputy chief, but what is the service life? We're talking about 8 years to repay or not to repay this, but to purchase this. What's the service life?
We expect for a frontlight apparatus to run about 8 to 10 years.
Okay.
And the ones we're replacing are 12 and 18 years old, so.
Okay, that's good to know. And then I apologize. I don't have the best memory, but in the 3.5 years I've been serving on the council, it seems like we have purchased a number of ambulances and other apparatus. And I believe other departments, divisions in the city, they have pool replacement funds that we pay in every year to kind of level out so we're not having big spikes.
Yeah, so previously, we bought all of our apparatus in 1 year, and we have been trying to stagger that as much as we can to try to get on more of a steady pace. So we're not buying $2 million in a year. We spread them out, so we're buying one per year or one every other year in the future, but it's taking some time to get to that point. But my understanding is this is all factored into that pool fund that fleet has to pay for these, so it's not additional money. Is that correct, Dan?
Okay. And in the past ones, the ambulances that recently have been financed similarly, or is this a change? This is similar.
So we've done one other lease for a ladder truck and an engine that was similar to this one, and then all the rest have been bought through fleet funds.
Okay.
Which comes out of that pool where those were spread out. So we bought one year, and then two, and then another two, and then one more.
Okay. And then the reason that this is coming to us in this format rather than as like a budget line is because this is not an appropriation but a lease purchase. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. We have been working with Zions to finalize the terms of this lease, and they've just been completed in the last several days. The noticing requirements to approve what we're asking the council to approve tonight, my understanding is 24 hours. The noticing requirements to approve an appropriation is longer. I think it's 5 days, 5 business days. And so because of that, we had missed the time frame for the appropriation. So we plan to come back to the council 2 weeks from today with the appropriation of this amount for the vehicles.
So a $2.4 million appropriation, or an appropriation just for the payments through the end of this year, fiscal year?
The entire amount, because the money will be spent up front, and then the payments will take place after the fact, if that makes sense. So we'll borrow the $2.49 million. We will spend that over the next year as the vehicles are built, and then we'll repay the $2.49 million over the next 8 years.
Okay. So could this have been done in last year's budget process? I mean, I'm trying to figure. It sounds like this we've scheduled to pay for these. We knew this purchase was coming. I'm trying to learn as I go. So why wasn't that part of the budget process?
And Dustin's probably best to address that. I would say a lot of what goes into this is before we can go out and do an RFP for lease financing, we have to be pretty specific about what the financing will be for and what the amounts will be. And so over the past several months, work has been done by the fire department to determine what trucks will cost, what their needs are, what the equipment requirements will be. And so as all that information's been gathered, are now in a position where we can essentially go out and request lease financing from the financial institutions. And so that's part of it, but let me let Dustin address that.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is substantially what Dan mentioned, that not knowing the total amount, we don't know necessarily exactly how much to program into the budget. What we will include in the budget is that payment portion to be included in the general fund's contribution to the vehicle replacement schedule. And so typically items like this, we treat it similar to how we treat grants, where those are items that we don't appropriate through the normal budgeting process. One, it affects comparability year over year, because this isn't a regular item that it would look like we're, having lots of peaks and troughs, when really the normal budget expenditure is that 8-year repayment plan rather than the initial purchase, which is also why we chose to appropriate the building funds of the $70 million building funds rather than wait until the end of the fiscal year and do it through the normal budgeting process, because that would add $70 million to our budget process and again affects that comparability year over year.
Okay, thank you. Right now I'm in the budget mode, and so it seems like budget is everything that's kind of expected, and then appropriations are the things that come up that you weren't planning on. And so I'm trying to reconcile, were we planning on this, or was this like a surprise that we had fell through the cracks and didn't realize we needed to purchase this year?
So we were planning on it. I think what wasn't known was the specific needs. We have in the past, the prior appropriation is a good example, that we appropriated $2,040,000 for the prior, I think that's the right amount. Ended up actually needing more than that through some other equipment needs. We were able to address some of those needs, and so part of this was waiting until far enough in the process that we could get accurate quotes to be able to know how much to appropriate. We could have added a baseline and came back for just the incremental portion between the two, but I think it's just a matter of preference. And I think if the council would rather see those things included in the base budget, I think that's something that we could accommodate with help, with direction from the administration.
Mr. Chair, and it looks like Wayne wanted to comment too. The other way to think of it too is remember that we didn't have this money when the budget year started because we're borrowing it. So we're borrowing the money, and we couldn't budget it before because we didn't know exactly how much we were going to borrow. So we've now borrowed it, so it's income. We've received $2.4 million of income. Now that we've received it, it has to be appropriated to be spent.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And I just appreciate that Mr. Borgett has kind of helped drill into me that we have one-time expenses and we have ongoing expenses. And we've tried to shift things from one-time expenses more to ongoing by pooling and building up funds and all that. And so I was trying to figure out where this fit in. Is this a one-time surprise, or is this?
It's an ongoing item that we'll address through the budgeting process, but the initial purchase is the one-time transaction that we're appropriating.
Okay.
That initial purchase using those lease proceeds.
Okay. Thank you for your patience and answering my questions. I appreciate.
If I may just mention one thing, as I sit here and think about it, Councilman Winterton, one of the other reasons it's structured as a lease is that enables it to be tax exempt in terms of the Internal Revenue Code, and the structure is related to the lease structure as opposed to a different debt structure. So,
Thank you. All right, where are we at? I think now to go to public comment, unless there's any other questions or comments. So we'll open this to public comment. If there's anyone would like to come forward and address the council on this item. Seeing none, we will close the public comment. Is there any discussion among the council? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote, and those in favor of the implied motion? And that's unanimous. Item 4, the last item on the agenda, is an implied motion on a resolution authorizing the mayor to create an interlocal agreement with Utah County for vote-by-mail election for municipal primary and general elections to be held on Tuesday, August 13th, 2019, and Tuesday, November 5th, 2019. This will be presented by our Provo City Recorder, Ms. Amanda Erkenbrack.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. So I'm excited to present this tonight. There's been a lot of good changes that have happened with the county, and so The purpose of this resolution is to authorize the mayor to go ahead and execute this agreement. So I'll give you a brief overview of it if that's okay. The contract is just like we've seen in the past. There's three main parts. There's the agreement, Exhibit A, which is the scope of work, and that discusses what the city provides versus what the county provides. And then Exhibit B discusses the cost. So starting with the services the city provides, they're mostly candidate-oriented, including candidate filing, financial disclosures, publishing notices, communicating with the candidates to keep them current on legal requirements. We get final approval of the ballot and ballot programming. We post the official reported results, and we canvass the final results. So those are basically, in a nutshell, our responsibilities. Services the county provides. There's a lot more, as you can see. The main ones, ballot layout and design, printing and mailing the ballot. They provide prepaid return postage, which is big. That's something we really wanted last year, if you recall. We didn't have that, so they've agreed to do that this year. They also do poll worker recruitment, training, and compensation. They conduct audits and recounts as required or needed. They operate the service centers. They handle all of that for us. They're available for election day administration support. And they provide the final canvas reports so that we can canvas our results. You'll notice the very last item on this list is, this was really important to us. This is the county committing to us. It's loosely worded, but it's the best we could do considering that we have a bit of an unknown situation. We need data for our election map so that on election night we can get those results updated and they're posted by precinct. I think most of you are familiar with it. It's been a really handy tool. So they are committing to give us the data in a timely manner in the format they are able to provide. So it's a new vendor. We're not quite sure what the output file will look like. We've already gotten a sample though, and so far it looks good. So we're optimistic about that. This is the cost. As of March 1st, we had 40,857 active voters. We have the primary election and the general election, so 2 elections. Our total cost won't exceed $1.80 per voter, so total cost is $147,085.20. This is a photograph of a board that's actually in the county building. This year I've seen a lot stronger effort to really make the other cities partners in this effort. They're reaching out to us almost daily. And I thought this was a good example of just one way that they're really including the other cities. So the only one I don't see on here is Highland. I know that they were a little bit iffy, but for the most part, I think all of the other cities are captured. And then an overview of the election. This isn't specific to the contract, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what will happen this year. It is a vote by mail election. We have our candidate declaration period coming up. That will be June 3rd through the 7th. Our primary election, as you mentioned earlier, is Tuesday, August 13th, and our general is Tuesday, November 5th. We will have our early voting or pre-election day service center at the county. It won't be at the rec center like we've had it in the past. That's caused a lot of problems with just the general traffic flow, and so the county said they'll do it at their building. It's not used a lot, but they wanted to have the option available. The county has selected a new vendor. It's ES&S. They have additional equipment. They provided more scanners so they can process things more effectively. And then they also mentioned that they've automated the signature verification process. Before it was a very manual looking at signatures. They found a way to automate that as well as the counting process, so that's great news. One thing I learned today that I'm really excited about is that they will have a lot fewer provisional ballots. In the past, we've had a lot that come in on election day and they're all provisional. This year, the only ones that will be considered provisional are those that register the same day of the election or change their address. Anything else, so if you lose your ballot, misplace it, and you go in, they'll print you a ballot, you'll cast it, and that's actually not a provisional. It'll just be your regular ballot, and they'll scan it on site. So they have scanners and printers, and they're counted and tallied on site at the election center. So that's great. We'll have quicker results. The last thing I wanted to mention is we just recently, John and I met with Jean at the library yesterday. We are going to install a drive-up drop box at the library. This will be on the north side by the book return, if you know where that is. And it will look like this. So it'll hold up to 500 ballots. They actually say it holds quite a bit more. And it will just be located right next to the book return. This helps us with our return postage cost. The more people that put it in the drop box, the lower our cost is in the end. So that is really it. Do you have any questions for me? Yes.
I like the idea of the ballot box, but, and do you already have them at other locations now?
The other ballot drop box locations? We plan to have the one here that we usually have. That will be here throughout the 3-week period. And then on election day, there will also be one at the rec center.
Okay, so you wouldn't have the one at the rec center at the same time as down here?
So the one at the rec center is just on election day because that's where our vote service center is.
Yeah,
And that's just for people who want to run in and drop off their ballot.
right.
It's that orange box that you're used to seeing.
And so how long will this one at the library be available?
This one will go up 21 days before the election, at least. So I think that puts us somewhere the end of July. And then we'll leave it up through the general election. And at 8 p.m. on election day, they'll have either me or Janine go there. We'll make sure those people in line get their ballot in, and then we'll close it and lock it.
Okay, I was just wondering why if it's up 21 days ahead that you
That's
didn't.
because that's when we mail out the ballots.
Right, but I just wondered why the rec center wouldn't be the same way.
And the rec center, we could possibly do that. I think the concern at this point is the county having so many different drop boxes to empty, but that's a great suggestion, and we could certainly do that. I know that was a popular location last year, so we can take that feedback to them. Anything else?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I'm remembering, I think it was something that Ms. Wise talked about last time. I think it was her that told the story that with all of the kind of questions about signatures and all of that, there was only one instance where someone came in and said, I've lost my ballot. They voted again, or they voted, and then the county caught that they had actually submitted their ballot. That's why they couldn't find it, as they actually had mailed it in and they had just forgotten. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around, if someone comes in and says, oh, I have a lost ballot, they're given a new ballot, they fill it out, they submit it, and it's not provisional, would we be able to catch something like that?
Yes, so what they will do is the one that they fill out at the vote service center will be counted as their ballot. In the event we find that there was one that mailed in, it will cancel that original one out.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? True.
All right, thank you. This item, we will open it for public comment. If anyone is here and would like to talk about it, please come forward. Be sure to state your name and city of residence.
Beth Alligood, Provo. I was just going to highly encourage that the rec center ballot box be there 21 days beforehand, because that is a location that many people know to go to submit. The county location is a great location, but a lot of people won't know and won't travel that way. I would love to see a ballot box kind of closer to the west side, but I understand that that's not as popular. And there's not as many people out there right now, but I think expectations of where the ballot boxes are, the rec center is probably your highest expectation of where they can vote, or here at City Center. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a good point where I think there's value in having one at the library, but most people I think are accustomed to it being at the rec center, and since the library and rec center are very close, anyway, so it might be something to relay to the county.
Parking's a lot easier at the rec center than at the county building also, if you want to run in and drop it off. When we looked at the recreation center, part of the concern we had was there's not really a place to have a drive-up box. Otherwise, you'll block a lane. We didn't really assume that when we built the recreation center, that we'd have to eliminate some parking stalls to get a drive-up box. I think that was part of the reason for going to the library, was we already had a drive-up island. It was there. It was easy. So at least so you know, that was the rationale behind deciding to put it at the library.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Appreciate that background.
I was just going to say that the one at the rec center, I mean, if they have it there on the day of election, it's not a drive-up. It's just there probably by the east doors where the information desk is. And if that's just a common logical place, you just put it inside. It doesn't have to be a drive-up.
Yeah. We haven't closed public comment, so we'd love to hear from...
For public comment, thank you. The other thing I would just mention, as Amanda and I have been working on this, the plan is also to let the residents know through the utility newsletter about the location of where this drop box will be at the library, and so that could help to make people aware of it as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Allagood, for sparking this discussion. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we will close this item. Public comment on this item. Is there any more discussion among the council? Not seeing any, I will call for a vote. All in favor? I didn't see your hand. Okay, and that is unanimous. And with that,
Well, sit tight, because we've got ice cream. We kind of figured that we'd get done before 6:30, so we can just run upstairs to grab it. The reward for being done before 6:30 is ice cream. It's all about bribery.
thank you, Mayor. If there is no objection, and hopefully within the next 9 minutes, we will now adjourn by unanimous consent.